If there is one thing you must address to stay healthy, avoid the chronic diseases of aging, and feel genuinely well over the long term, it is chronic inflammation. Not the visible kind that appears when you cut your skin. A different kind entirely. A low-grade, persistent, invisible fire running quietly through the body for years, damaging tissue, disrupting organs, and accelerating every process associated with aging. This is the unifying force behind the modern epidemic of chronic disease, and understanding how to control it may be the most important thing you can do for your health. Chronic inflammation is not caused by infection. There is no fever, no obvious signal that something is wrong. Researchers call it sterile inflammation, triggered not by bacteria or viruses, but by the conditions of modern life. The food we eat, the toxins we absorb, the stress we carry, and the disruption of the microbial communities living inside us. The immune system, designed to defend against genuine threats, becomes chronically overactivated and generates a sustained inflammatory response the body was never built to maintain. Over time, this produces heart disease, type 2 diabetes, obesity, cancer, autoimmune disorders, Alzheimer's disease, and more. Inflammation is not a side effect of these diseases. In most cases, it is a central driver of them. The first and most impactful change most people can make is to what they eat. The standard diet consumed across most of the developed world is profoundly inflammatory. Ultra-processed foods, refined grains, excess sugar, industrial seed oils, artificial additives, emulsifiers, and residues from pesticides and herbicides all place a significant inflammatory burden on the body. Removing these items substantially reduces that burden. But beyond general junk food, several specific foods deserve particular attention. Gluten has become significantly more inflammatory in modern food production. The wheat varieties most commonly grown today contain considerably more gluten proteins and more starch than older varieties. And many people who react to modern wheat report no such reaction to ancient varieties, including farro, emmer, and einkorn. For individuals experiencing chronic inflammation, reducing or eliminating modern wheat products is often an effective first step. Heritage varieties tend to be better tolerated by those without celiac disease. Conventional dairy is another common inflammatory driver. The proteins in commercial cow's milk and the processing methods used to produce most dairy can trigger digestive disruption, congestion, acne, and systemic inflammation in a significant portion of the population. Goat and sheep products tend to be better tolerated, and fermented dairy causes fewer problems than fresh for many people. Reducing conventional dairy and observing the effect is a practical experiment worth trying. Sugar drives harm through a specific and often overlooked mechanism. Excess dietary sugar promotes the accumulation of abdominal fat, and that fat is not inert tissue. Fat cells in the abdominal region produce and release inflammatory signaling molecules called adipocytokines that circulate through the body and sustain chronic inflammation. The more abdominal fat present, the more of these molecules are released. Reducing sugar lowers fat accumulation, which lowers inflammation through this pathway alongside many others. On the other side, certain foods actively reduce inflammation through direct biological mechanisms. The most consistently supported are the colorful plant compounds called phytochemicals, found in vegetables, fruits, legumes, and herbs. The deep reds, blues, purples, oranges, and greens of plant foods reflect the presence of these compounds, which work through multiple pathways to reduce inflammatory signaling. The closer these foods are to their natural state, and the more recently they were harvested, the more of these compounds they retain. Produce grown in rich soil and consumed without extended storage contains meaningfully more than conventionally grown food that has traveled long distances before reaching the table. Omega-3 fatty acids are among the most important dietary regulators of inflammation. The long-chain forms found in fatty fish are particularly potent, and smaller species tend to be lower in contaminants. Sardines, herring, mackerel, and anchovies are excellent sources, as is wild-caught salmon. Berries and other low-glycemic fruits provide concentrated doses of anti-inflammatory compounds without a heavy sugar load. Nuts and seeds, including walnuts, almonds, pecans, and macadamia nuts, contribute anti-inflammatory fats and bioactive compounds. Pasture-raised and grass-fed animal products differ substantially from conventionally raised equivalents. Research shows that conventional meat tends to increase inflammatory markers, while grass-fed meat does not and may reduce them. All meat is not the same. Gut health is central to inflammation regulation throughout the body. The microbiome plays a critical role in calibrating immune function, and feeding it well requires prebiotic fiber from foods like artichokes, Jerusalem artichokes, asparagus, and plantains, alongside regularly fermented foods including kimchi, sauerkraut, miso, natto, and tempeh. Herbs and spices contribute meaningfully as well. Turmeric contains curcumin, one of the most studied naturally occurring anti-inflammatory compounds. Rosemary, ginger, garlic, and oregano all contain biologically active anti-inflammatory compounds and can be incorporated easily into regular cooking. Exercise is one of the most powerful and underused regulators of inflammation. Approximately 30 minutes of vigorous movement daily combined with resistance training several times per week reduces systemic inflammation, improves insulin sensitivity, and strengthens immune regulation. The benefit applies to appropriate training loads. Chronic overtraining can itself become an inflammatory stressor, so the goal is consistent moderate activity rather than exhaustive performance. The state of the mind and nervous system directly affects inflammation. When the body perceives stress, it activates hormonal pathways that alter gene expression in ways that promote inflammation. Chronic stress sustained over months and years elevates inflammatory signals and accelerates biological aging. Stress cannot be fully avoided, but developing a consistent practice for managing the stress response is as important as dietary changes. Without that piece, other interventions are always working against a current of stress-generated inflammation. The microbiome deserves focus because of the specific ways modern life degrades it. Glyphosate, widely used as an agricultural herbicide and present as a residue in many conventionally grown foods, disrupts gut bacterial communities in ways that promote inflammation. Common medications, including proton pump inhibitors, antibiotics, and corticosteroids, alter the microbiome significantly. Low-fiber, highly processed diets deprive it of the substrates needed to maintain healthy populations. The result is a gut environment generating inflammatory signals rather than regulating them. Environmental toxins, including heavy metals, petrochemicals, and pesticide residues, act as immunotoxins that stimulate immune activation even at low levels, adding to the chronic inflammatory burden. Reducing exposure through thoughtful food choices and filtered water is a meaningful step. At the cellular level, sustained inflammation produces senescent cells, which have stopped dividing but persist in the body, continuously releasing inflammatory molecules that damage surrounding tissue and draw other cells into the same state over time. Several supplements have meaningful evidence behind them for reducing inflammation. Vitamin D, 3 at 2 to 5,000 international units. Daily, regulates hundreds of genes involved in immune function and inflammatory signaling, and is associated with reduced infection risk and improved immune regulation. Omega-3 fatty acid supplements increase the availability of anti-inflammatory fats for those who do not consume adequate amounts through diet, with the best products retaining the full spectrum of bioactive lipid compounds that help resolve inflammatory processes. Curcumin supplements, particularly those formulated for enhanced absorption, provide anti-inflammatory and antioxidant support at doses difficult to reach through food. B-complex vitamins support metabolic function, immune regulation, and antioxidant production, including glutathione, which helps manage oxidative stress closely linked to inflammatory burden. The encouraging reality is that inflammation responds to the choices made consistently over time regarding food, movement, stress, sleep, and environment. The discouraging reality is that most default patterns of modern life drive inflammation in precisely the wrong direction. The path toward better health requires actively choosing against those defaults in a sustained and deliberate way. If you found this breakdown of chronic inflammation and what drives it useful, share it with someone who needs to understand why so many common health problems share a common underlying cause. Hit the like button if you believe this information should reach more people. Subscribe for more evidence-based content on what drives long-term health and how to work with your body rather than against it. Leave a comment with the change you plan to implement first, because consistent small improvements to the conditions that drive inflammation are where meaningful change begins.